It's another Royal season off and running and off and stumbling. I don't know what to say about the 0-3 start, but we're going to try to figure it out here on this week's edition of the Kaufman Corner, proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. The Royals do begin 0-3, really struggling to hit. They are shut out in back-to-back games to start the year. We'll talk about what that means for the Royals offense here moving forward. Richard Lovelady is no longer a Kansas City Royal, but at least the haul they got back was giant. We'll get the thoughts of one Rany Jazayerli after we get his thoughts. As I tweeted earlier, I'll try to put his head back on his shoulders because I think there's a chance it might blow up during that part of our conversation. We'll talk about the percentage chance that the Royals get back to 500. That's a question we received on Twitter already. Likes and dislikes for what we've seen so far. How much should the defense be scaring this team? Kyle Isbel in center field. Starting pitching, not so bad. We'll get into that. The bullpen. How about a veteran for the middle of the lineup, since the lineup seems to be struggling? 4 games with the Jays are next as we record this here on a Sunday night. If you catch us via the podcast, remember we do go live with the stream Sunday nights at 10 o'clock most of the time. Sometimes it's a Monday. Let's get to this 0-3 start here on Kaufman Corner.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany and the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And welcome to the Kaufman Corner as we break it down exactly what is going on with the Kansas City Royals. Spring hopes eternal, hope springs eternal, I believe, if I get that in the right order, is the way this is supposed to work, Rany. And everybody was quite excited. Opening day was warm. Everybody was discussing how excited they were about how warm it was going to be. Not warm the bats of the Kansas City Royals as they're shut out in both games. Your level of concern, it's only 3 of 162 games, but we did discuss how much we thought it was very important that this team get off to a good start. 0-3 is not the start we were looking for. Level of concern is what?
Level of surprise, unfortunately, is close to 0 because I'm a Kansas City Royals fan. And starting 0-3 it's a rite of passage that occurs seemingly every other year. My level of concern, in terms of making the playoffs, there was a long shot to begin with, and I would say it's a lot longer now. Being 3 games behind the Minnesota Twins is already a big road to climb. In terms of my level of concern as to whether this season is going to be a disappointment, a disaster, that they're not going to accomplish the goals that we've set out for them, that's a little bit less. Right. There are some good things to take from this opening series. It is ironic that we spent pretty much all winter long talking about the pitching, and the season gets off to a start, and the offense is the culprit in falling flat on its face, and the Royals don't score a run in their first 2 games for the first time in their history, and they don't have a lead at any point in the first series of the season. So we can harp on the fact that the pitching looks better, but I'd almost rather the pitching look a little worse and MJ Melendez or Bobby Witt have a single hit to start the season. Those two and Vinny Pasquantino combined, I think, have 1 hit all season in like 25 or 30 at bats. That's a little bit concerning, but realistically, they're young. It's 3 games. I'm not that worried. I think the biggest takeaways we can take from this part of the season are because sample sizes are more important, are pitch velocity and pitch type. What we're seeing from the pitchers in terms of how hard they're throwing, what they're throwing, if they're throwing new stuff. We could talk about that a little bit. There are some signs of concern there. There are also some positive signs. But ultimately, yeah, the team's got to hit, and it's not a good sign when Matt Duffy is tied for second on the team in hits, and has half the home runs and half the RBIs of the entire team.
Yeah, I listen. I very much I'm gonna, I'm not gonna rant and rave. I like the coaching. I think there's some things to like. I think it was pointed out to me that last year the Royals scored 4 runs in their first 2 games, and they were 2-0. So they've scored the same 4 runs. They're just 0-2. And that's just baseball. That's just the way things are. And over the long haul, if you spread the runs out, you're going to, that's why run differentials are a better indicator of who you really are, really, than record, because over the long haul, you're going to kind of continue to put up the kind of runs and allow the kind of runs that you've been doing. And so, I mean, the run differential is not good, right? I'm not trying to say that's it, but I want to be more optimistic that the pitching shows that they're going to be in ball games. This one got away from the bullpen. This one being the game on Sunday, where it got to 7-4, but it was a 2-1 game for much of it. Brad Keller was in the game. It was his usual kind of line, save one, and that's that the strikeouts are up, and that's, to your point,
which is a positive. And like a lot of Brad Keller starts, he was throwing strikes until suddenly he wasn't. And he walked 2 or 3 guys in his last inning, and so the overall line, he's got to throw more strikes, and that's something that the team's been harping on all spring. But the strikeouts were impressive, and if you look at least right now, the last I checked, Statcast, PitchFX, it looked like he was only throwing fastballs and sliders. But Andy Rogers reported that some of those sliders were probably curveballs, and I think that the PitchFX Statcast system just hasn't caught up to the fact that he's throwing a new pitch, and it may take him a few days. So the fact that he's throwing in that curveball that we saw in spring training, and he's getting strikeouts, that's a positive sign.
And that's what I wanted to get to. But and one of the other things, we sat there. This was my fantasy baseball weekend, so I had a bunch of friends in town that, are big baseball fans, and we were talking about, just kind of the lament of being a fantasy baseball play, a team owner, whatever the hell we are, and watching your guys. And now he said, we've gone. My buddy JB said, we've gone from the days of where we're like, okay, get him out there for the 7th, get him out there for the 8th. We need the strikeouts too. It's 6 in the door, man. Like, we don't want to see him come back out there. Like, everybody in the baseball world is hip to the fact that there's only a handful of guys that are good enough to stand on that mound and beat major league hitters a third time. And I don't think Brad Keller is one of those guys. Now, I understand you want to get more than 4 and change, but that, if I'm going to add something to the conversation about the pitching, is, and again, just 3 games, and I expect these guys to be able to get deeper, but this has been the issue with Brad Keller. They want to try to unlock the potential and think he can be a starter. Okay, but are they going to give Brad Keller a long-term deal?
I don't think so.
No,
I can't imagine anybody's giving him more than 1 year. I mean, he's a year-to-year guy at this point, because you don't know from 1 year to the next what you're getting with him.
Well, and that's my point. Is right now, would the Royals offer him a multi-year deal? The answer is no. They would offer him only a 1-year deal because he hasn't earned it. And the moment they feel like they would offer him a multi-year deal, he won't take it, because he's better to get to free agency. And we talked about this a lot on my radio show about Juju Smith-Schuster when they signed him, that the deal was such that it was really, there's no way he was going to be in Kansas City more than a year, because if you wanted to sign him, he needed to go to free agency, because a bidding war would be likely. And if you did, if he wanted to stay, then you probably didn't want to sign him. Well, that's where Brad Keller's at. So my point is this on Brad Keller. I've seen enough of the Keller Coaster, as I like to call it, to know what he is. I am encouraged by the increased strikeouts, but I don't think there's any chance this is going to be a 7 or 8 inning guy. I don't think there's any chance that on the other end, Brad Keller becomes one of the handful of guys that should ever see anybody a third time through the order. And so I want to see them manage Brad Keller to have the prettiest statistics that they can possibly present to trade Brad Keller. And I like Brad Keller, but to me, it's been long enough with Brad. The Royals have a lot of guys that they like, and they run out there to the ire of their fan base, to the frustrations of Twitter and social media that creates, I think, a negative environment and a negative atmosphere. And they just don't ever want to give up, as I've said many times, because I don't think they really know who the good players are. And so they got to hang on to everybody just in case they might get good. The sole purpose, for Brad Keller this whole year, has to be to pretty the stats to trade him. Period. End of discussion.
Absolutely. And he's not the only one. To their credit, they didn't just go into the year hoping that Brad Keller, hope is not a strategy. And for so many years, that was this Royal strategy for so many of their players, just hope they'd get better. It's his last year before free agency. You say, well, why even bother bringing him back? We question whether or not he was worth the money they were giving him, but he came in with a new pitch. They've tried to make him a different, therefore better pitcher than he was before. One start, we're not going to know that. I think we got to give it a chance. And he looked good until the third time through the lineup, and that's really the key. You mentioned, it used to be some guys you would want to get them out of there before the fourth time through the lineup. Now, really, most smart teams, the Rays of the world, they really try to avoid even that third time. 18 batters is the limit for a lot of guys. And Brad Keller is absolutely no exception. Last year, his first time through the lineup, hitters had, I believe, a 699 OPS. The second time through, 733. The third time through, 832. Right? His career numbers, the first time through the lineup, 703. The second time, 673. But then the third time, 805. He is absolutely not the guy who should be facing batters three times through. Now, you could argue a new pitch might change that, but until he proves otherwise, he needs to be an 18 batter only guy, which means maybe you don't send him out there for the fifth inning. I've said this many times that the rule, the 5 innings in order to earn a win rule, is a straitjacket that prevents teams from making the right decision about when to take out their starting pitcher, because we have this assumption bare minimum you have to get through 5 innings. And honestly, for most starting pitchers, certainly guys like Brad Keller who have command issues, who work their pitch count up and therefore get to 18 batters before the 5th inning is complete, honestly, these are guys who should be going 3 to 4 innings tops. And he'd be a lot more effective as a pitcher if they did so. And today, they got out of the 5th inning without too much damage, but he had to come out of the game. And I believe Amir Garrett came in and got out of the jam. It'll be very interesting to see how Quintero handles Brad Keller's, usage patterns going forward. He's made some decisions that I like so far in this first series. But being aggressive about pulling his starters from the game is something that I think I'm really hoping we will see as the season goes along. And he certainly has the pedigree from Tampa Bay that he can't claim he doesn't know better.
Right. And that's what, and again, it's early, guys aren't stretched out. You had a WBC with Brady Singer. We're going to see what they're going to do with Brady Singer. I don't know how much in the back of their mind they're like, we need 5 innings from somebody else with the Brady Singer start that's coming up. So again, very early, want to see him get into the rhythm of the season and start to feel where it is. But if anybody's not going to be handcuffed, you mentioned it, the 5-inning win, the organization that was not handcuffed to that just kicked the door down on it with the opener was the Rays. I mean,
exactly.
That's what we're wanting in this situation. And if there's a pitching staff that's ever been, you've looked at it and said that we're not going to manage this ball club like we've got the Glavine, Maddox, Smoltz Braves. It's this one. I mean, if you're going to get creative and mix and match and long guys, and wasn't that what we were all looking at with Yarborough? And and frankly, that's probably where Keller belongs, is as either an opener or the long reliever, a power long reliever to come in after somebody's gone there.
Exactly. And that's sort of the fringe benefit of having the opener, is that the opener is a 1-inning guy, but then the guy who comes in afterwards can qualify for the win without having to throw 5. And you're no longer in that straitjacket of, he has to throw X number of innings because we owe it to him as the starting pitcher to give him a chance for the win. No, there's none of that. The opener is a 1-inning guy. There's no way he's qualifying for the win. And then the second guy, the long guy, the Brad Keller in this scenario, can pitch as long as he's effective, and you take him out the minute he's not, and you don't have to worry. He can get the win even if he just throws an inning or two. And we know this because the very first secondary, I don't know, we need a word to describe that who follows the opener. But really, the very first seconder in Major League history was Hello, Ryan Yarbrough,
Yeah.
who got, I think, 13 wins as a rookie. And I think he only threw like 90 innings, 100 innings, somewhere in that range, because he was coming in. The opener had done his job. He did his job. You come out of the game in the 4th or 5th inning, you'd throw 3 innings, and he'd get a win. So having Yarbrough open for Keller seems to me to be a smart strategy that the Royals should consider going forward. It would solve some problems. It would allow Yarbrough to pitch more regularly. Maybe he goes 2 innings instead. I don't like the idea of using him the way they used him in this first series, where he just came in as a regular lefty reliever and pitched 1 inning, and that was it.
And I quizzed at every possible opportunity that they were made available about the opener, and there seems to be no hint. There was certainly no excitement or interest seemingly put towards that we were headed in that direction. And so I honestly, which I don't get, right? Because I think there were legs to it and merit to it, and certainly there are certain rotations that scream for it, and this is one of them. There is nobody who looks like a guy who should be seeing 27 batters.
Well, there are certainly certain pitchers in this rotation for whom it makes sense. Like, fine, you don't want to use Zach Greinke in that role. That's fine. Zach Greinke will get you 5 innings. Jordan Lyles, say what you want about him. I've said plenty. He's a guy who probably can get you 5. He's fairly efficient. Brady Singer, 5 innings, sure. But Brad Keller, and then, of course, the other guy who we're going to be dealing with this in a couple of days is Chris Bubich. Chris Bubich can be effective at times, but he's also a guy who fights the strike zone sometimes, who tries to get too fine because his stuff isn't necessarily overwhelming, and is the sort of guy who can be in the 4th inning and has already thrown 83 pitches. And it's like, do you really want to take the chance of having to leave him out there through 5 innings and risk that 3rd time through the strike zone, through the lineup? I would much rather have an opener for Chris Bubich and have Chris Bubich go 3 to 4 innings. And now you've gotten through 5 innings without having to expose Chris Bubich to a lineup a 3rd time.
Okay, just based upon what you said there, can I quiz you? How many times did Zach Greinke go more than 6 innings?
More than 6 innings?
Last year, how many times?
Did he take the mound in the 7th inning? Probably 3.
Twice.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
he went 6 1/3 on August 11th, and he went 7 innings. Now I'm going off just innings. I might have to look. There might be a 6+1 batter.
Right, exactly.
So maybe not. I'm just as far as recording outs in the 7th inning. It was just 2 times. I bring that up just to say I get what you're saying, and I have no problem if you say, okay, well, Greinke's not a guy that we'd consider opening because he's a veteran. He knows blah blah blah. But there's nobody on the staff that really warrants any kind of special consideration. No one. I mean, Zach is the one that has the resume that if he said, look, I'll sign, but don't play any games. I start. That's what I do. Here's the deal. Okay. Then he's worth having on the ball club, and you handle him that way. But even Brady Singer, I mean, Brady Singer does not have the pedigree at this point in his career to say, okay, this is how I'm going to be used. I just want to be clear. Like, so if you're honest about your team and what you are from that standpoint, then there should be no one that is beyond reproach. What is the best way to win baseball?
Well, I would agree with that, but the point I would simply make is you can't have 5 openers for 5 starters, because then you then have 3 relievers for the rest of the game. So you have to pick and choose your battles. That's my point. That's why it's like, if it's borderline, fine, stick with the starter. You have the flexibility then to use more relievers. But 1 or 2 rotation spots, if you're going to choose 1 or 2, to me, it's Brad Keller and Chris Bubich. Absolutely. And that's, I mean, why else did you sign Jordan Lyles if not to just have one spot where you could just go 5 and dive, but not have to worry, or you don't feel bad about pulling that guy after 4 innings because he's already got a 2-year contract. He can't complain if he didn't get to stay in the game to collect that mythical win, right? So, but use it somewhere. Use every tool at your disposal, and that does seem like a tool that the Royals should be using at some point.
8 times in 27 starts, Brady Singer, or 8 times, I guess, in 27 appearances, because I think there might have been a couple of relief appearances up here at the beginning. 8 times he went into the 7th inning or later.
Well, that makes him an Iron Man in modern baseball.
Yes, it does. And I might even have missed this 8 1/3 here. Let me count it again: 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times in 27. So 1 out of 3, he's going into the 7th inning. So he's by far the guy that can take the ball and go the deepest, for this team. We're brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. If you've got any kind of parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear at Gann Asphalt and Concrete since 19 and 94, full service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. You can find them online right now at ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gan Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor. All things parking lots. Make sure you tell them you heard about them right here on Kaufman Corner. Likes, dislikes, anything else that's jumping at you here so far?
So I'll give you one like and one dislike.
Okay,
and the like, you're going to laugh at me because I'm already having to bite my tongue a little bit. But I liked what I saw from Aroldis Chapman. I got to admit. Look, when the facts change, my opinion changes. That's the way the world is supposed to work. And it's not simply struck out the side. That's nice. But I don't know if you noticed the velocity readings on the gun. He was throwing hard. And yes, it's Aroldis Chapman. Of course he throws hard, but not really. His velocity has been declining for his last several years, which is one of the reasons why I was concerned about him, above and beyond the off-field stuff, just in terms of his on-field performance. He threw hard, right? I mean, I'm frustrated because when I look at different sources, I see different readings. According to the Baseball Savant, he threw a pitch 102.5 miles an hour. And that was on the broadcast. I think it came up as 103, which not only would be his hardest pitch in the last 2 years, it probably is up there among the hardest pitches ever thrown by a Royals pitcher. Yordan Ventura may have come close, but there's maybe Trevor Rosenthal. There's one or two other guys who may have gotten up there, but 102.5 would be incredibly high. But when I go to Fangraphs, that pitch is not listed. The hardest he threw was 100.8. So there's some discrepancies based on sources. However, his average velocity was 99.9 on his fastball. Last year, I think it was like 97.5. He had only 2 or 3 outings the entire season where his average fastball velocity was as high as it was in his opening outing this year. Those were both in July. In April last year, he was not anywhere close. So for a guy who's in his mid-30s, that's not what you don't normally expect velocity to come back like that. So if he's Aroldis Chapman throwing 100 is very different than Aroldis Chapman throwing 97. And this is obviously not a long-term solution. But you talk about, Brad Keller, get some pretty stats and trade him. That's exactly the philosophy they should be and probably are looking at with Aroldis Chapman. If he continues to throw that hard and the results are that good in 2 months, let's hope that this isn't like Dayton Moore where they wait till the trade deadline to trade a reliever where 4 months of that reliever on the trade market is going to be more valuable than 2 months. Let's hope they move him quickly. But he could be very a very nice trade chip.
I agree, and I think that is why he signed. I don't think the Royals will make any bones about it. If they make an improbable run, which it's even tough to have those words come out of your mouth when you start 0-3, but if they would make an improbable run to be in the mix, great. You've got yourself a very good piece and a power bullpen. But I think reality is that he's here to be traded, and the sign should go on the door right now. For sale. Let's go. Because if there's anybody, as soon as and I'm sure this has already been done, that the conversations amongst the general managers have been had, and JJ Picollo has made it known that listen, call on anybody. We're still putting this thing together here, so I'm sure that is part of it. But yeah, you're right. He looks good, and if he is dominant, then you've got a guy that becomes very valuable coming down the stretch run for somebody. He is going to be, he's going to have to show that he's going to show up to work. That's right. The problem. That
all the more reason you trade him as soon as you can. You don't want to take the chance of something going wrong on the field or off the field.
Yeah, for sure. How have you liked? Let's talk about the defense, right? Like overall pieces of the defense as a whole. Your thoughts on what we're looking at, because we spent a lot of the spring talking about this isn't a Rays looking lineup. The way they're putting it together, it's not a defensive-oriented lineup, which is what they would oftentimes do.
Right. I mean, so the good news is the Kyle Isbel looks to be as good as we hoped in center field. I mean, it's a small sample size, but honestly, his most impressive play might have been the one he did not make, which could have very well changed opening day. I mean, this is one of the reasons why you can't get too focused on the record right now. Is the first 2 games, you change 1 or 2 things here and there, and they can win. That first game, Kyle Isbel. Was it Byron Buxton, I believe, who hit the drive to right center? He was shaded a little bit to left of center and got a tremendous jump, dove, and was 2 inches from that getting into his glove. It might have been the best catch any major leaguer had made in the first 3 games of the season if he had caught it. He did not. It was a triple. Then, the next guy singles. Zach Greinke comes out of the game. They gave up 2 runs. They may not have given up any runs. He made a really good catch today, robbing Michael Taylor, his predecessor in the center fielder role for the Royals, of an extra base hit, slammed into the wall. Like, he's showing good range. The value of having a good defensive center fielder, is immense. And Kyle Isbel, to me, has impressed as much as anybody in the lineup in the opening series. I mean, he's looked good. He's had a couple of very loud outs. I mean, he's got a couple of hits, but I think he had at least 2 balls, exit velocities over 105 miles an hour that were turned into outs. But he's hitting the ball. You hit the ball consistently at 105 or higher, the hits will fall in. And he doesn't have to hit a ton with that defense. So I like that. That's the upside. The downside is the infield defense a little shaky here. Hunter Dozier in the first game nearly took out Bobby Witt's, the franchise's knee on a foul ball on a windy day. I guess it came back into fair territory, but was awkward. Then made a bad decision to try and look to second base to get the third out of an inning. And then by the time he threw to first, it was too late and the bases were loaded. They got out of it. But Hunter Dozier, who we already knew was not a good defensive third baseman, showed that in spades. Bobby Witt made a bad decision and tried to get an out at third base when he should have gone to first. And that led to a runner on third with 1 out instead of a runner on third with 2 outs. And that runner scored on a sacrifice fly. And that was another 2-0 game. And in that same game, I think the runner got from first to second on a pass ball from Salvador Perez. So a lot of shaky infield defense. When you're losing 2-0, 1 run, 2 runs is the game. And the defense is going to be something. The infield defense, with Witt and Dozier on the left side, I think is going to be a problem. I think Michael Massey is a good defensive second baseman. If Nick Prado eventually ends up at first, they have a good defensive option at first base, but I don't think they're going to get good defense on the other side of the infield as long as they're going with Dozier and Witt in the positions they're in. On that note, I don't know if you've noticed who's played third base for Omaha all 3 games so far this season.
I had not until I was getting ready for this conversation. And I said, well, let me look, because I couldn't even remember what, I was like, I think the Myers have been AAA, I think might have gotten going. And so I was looking back through it, and that would be your man, Nick Loftin.
Nick Loftin. By the way, Omaha's as good as the Royals are bad. They're 3-0. They're, there's always hope on the farm, and then those guys come up to the majors, and the cycle repeats itself.
Right.
But still, we can root for them, and they're. I mean, it's a good lineup. The top 5 is Samad Taylor, Michael Garcia, Nick Prado, Craig Gentry, and Nick Loftin. I mean, those are all prospects, good prospects. And Loftin is playing third, maybe in part because they have Samad Taylor at second base. With one of his positions, but he could be playing center field. He's not playing center field. Last year in AA, in 90 games, Nick Loftin started at third base 3 times. Then he moved up to AAA. Maybe the Royals were starting to feel like they needed a new solution at third base. He started 24 of 37 games at AAA last year at third base. Now he's 3 for 3. As frustrating as the Hunter Dozier experience is, and as frustrating as it is that the Royals have committed to him because he's not hitting, not fielding, it makes me feel good to know that they are aware of the problem and they are looking for solutions. And I do think Hunter Dozier's, everyday play is not going to be all season if he keeps it up like this.
Can we just for a second hit pause on the Nick Loftin part of the equation? And I want to go back to the play you talked about where Hunter Dozier almost, quote unquote, took out the franchise, I think is what you said, with him and Bobby Witt going over for a ball that was headed foul and then blew back in. Because if Lofton's playing third, it's because you start to feel like, either he's going to be one of those rare guys, Ben Zobrist, or, a handful of guys that can play in a number of different spots and play very well, right? That maybe that's going to be the case. They feel like, let's just get in the reps at third, make sure we can add this. It's yet another club in his bag for where we can play him. But let's go back to that play. Are you satisfied that with Bobby Witt Jr., you were watching a natural, top shelf major league shortstop go after that ball? And I said to, we were watching the game, and again, watching with baseball all weekend with friends that are big baseball fans. I said, is that a natural play? Is that what, I don't want to name some name and, you're trying to compare him to, you know, uh, whatever, Derek Jeter, you're trying to compare him. But like, as you watched it, you've watched thousands of baseball games. Did he play it right? I get your point about Hunter Dozier. And like, let's have some communication out there and get him out of the way. Call him off for one, right? If he's not been called off, it's because your shortstop wasn't sure he was going to get the ball. So he didn't call anybody off, right? So, like, I think, and I get where you're coming from with Dozier and the frustration there, and I don't want to see them collide and have Bobby Witt Jr. be out for 3 months or out for the year because Hunter Dozier's not doing it. But did Bobby Witt do what he needs to do as a shortstop? And I say that because now it does look like when you mentioned Lofton playing third, I had the exact same thought when I went and looked at where he played. They're putting him in at third to make this work. And I think there's a sense that this Bobby Witt Jr. at shortstop all year is a prove it moment. Prove it for him, prove it for them as an organization. We need to prove that he's a shortstop. Are you, in just a little bit of what you saw, convinced that this is a smooth fielding or the upside there to be a smooth fielding shortstop, that he took command of the field and he feels like, he can handle that position?
Right. Well, I mean, the answer is no. I'm not convinced, but it's not because of this one play. I mean, my concerns about Bobby Witt at shortstop predate this play. The play itself, I'm not. I actually think I'm fine with it. And for one thing, he caught the ball, and I know that sounds silly, but I'm still scarred maybe by the Allard Baird Royals, but I've seen too many pop-ups that end up like that and hit the ground to not at least appreciate the fact that he did make the catch. Should he have called off Hunter Dozier earlier? Possibly. It was very windy, and that ball was probably a third baseman's ball until late in its course. And I appreciated the athleticism that allowed him, with a 6'5", 240-pound third baseman, like bumping into his knee while he was catching the ball, to make the play and not bobble it. So I'm very hesitant to make criticisms about his overall shortstop play based on one ball, but this is the concern. And that you're right. The thing about playing Nick Lofton at third is if he comes up and plays third, that just cements Bobby Witt at shortstop. But that's, to me, Nick Lofton at third even if it's the backup plan, I'm glad they have a backup plan. Plan A is still Michael Garcia, as far as I'm concerned, who is playing shortstop, who's hitting .429 through 3 games. And to me, that is still the solution here. Move Witt over to third, put Michael Garcia at short, improve defense at 2 positions. But it's nice to know that even with the Michael Garcia plan in place, they look at Nick Lofton and say, can we make this guy a third baseman? Because we really need a third baseman, one way or the other.
Yes. And it adds to his value with the ball club for sure. And I'm with you, but I mean, I think every time you're watching Bobby Witt Jr., the only question is, he hit 20 home runs and 30 stolen bases. There are 2 questions. Is he going to get his on-base percentage up to where it was when he was a minor leaguer? And that makes him a much more valuable player than where it was toiling last year, sub 300 all year. That's question number 1. And question number 2 is, can he really handle short? Because those are the 2 pieces of the calculus formula that have to be inserted into how much do you offer him if you're going to keep him. And if you're not going to keep him, then immediately that his future is not 7 years from now with the Kansas City Royals, right? It's 4 years from now with somebody else, because you've got to flip and get the most. That, to me, is the most important thing. And I know nobody on this podcast wants to hear somebody sit and talk about trading Bobby Witt Jr., because all anybody wants is to have their 20-year guy, their next George Brett. But that is what this organization has to become. And I know everybody says that, and they're all on board, and they're all gung-ho for the Rays thing, and they want to do it, except for all my favorite players, because I like this guy, and I got a jersey and all this. That is what, on every game, the Kansas City Royals front office had better be doing. Is Bobby Witt Jr. a shortstop? If he's not, then the offer is this. If he won't take it, then the future is he's going someplace else, and we have to maximize the return. That is the cold, hard reality of watching consistent winning baseball in a small market. And they have to view these games that way every day.
Absolutely. I mean, look, the Rays, they got lucky. They got Evan Longoria to sign an incredibly long-term deal. basically his first week in the major leagues, when that was still considered almost unthinkable at the time. So they were able to keep. They had their closest thing they could ever have to a George Brett and Evan Longoria. They struck gold again with Wander Franco, getting Wander Franco to sign a 12-year contract after his rookie year. Although $200 million, I think, pretty much guaranteed. But those were the exceptions. The Rays. If you look at the Rays of 4 years ago, how many of the young hitters in that lineup are still in their lineup today? Right? Basically none. They are constantly churning. It may be cold-hearted, it may be ruthless, but as a fan, you have to decide: are you rooting for the players or are you rooting for the jersey? Are you rooting for the players? Are you rooting for the team, for the organization, for the city? If you're rooting for the team, the players come and go. I mean, look, you do it, and you can do it with your college allegiances all the time. I don't think the Royals have to be that ruthless, but the Dayton Moore approach on one side, hardcore Rays on the other side, the Royals should be somewhere in the middle there. So I'm not saying the Royals should be looking to trade Bobby Witt right now, but if you're a Royals fan, you should be able to appreciate Bobby Witt for who he is now, or who we hope he will be, hopefully a superstar in waiting, and also appreciate that you're probably going to enjoy him for 3 or 4 years, beyond last season. And if everything goes right, if you can sign him a long-term deal, wonderful. If not, yeah, you're going to have to say goodbye to him. But if you do it right, when you say goodbye to him, you're going to say hello to 2 or 3 top 100 prospects. And if one of those guys turns into Bobby Witt, guess what? You just started the process over again. It's okay. So I thought it was very interesting that today the Royals went up against Joe Ryan, the Twins starter, their number 3 starter, who's an excellent starter. I think he came into the season with a 3.70 career ERA and about 32 career starts, 2.5 or 3 wins in essentially a full season. He came up late in 2021. Do you know how the Twins got Joe Ryan? They traded 40-year-old Nelson Cruz, who was having a monster year, but they traded Nelson Cruz in the last year of his contract. Guess where? To Tampa Bay. They went to the pitching factory. Tampa's got so many pitchers, they can't keep them all. They needed a big thumper in their lineup for their playoff stretch. They traded a minor league pitcher they drafted, I think, in the 7th round out of college, and then turned him into an absolute beast. Joe Ryan's minor league numbers were exceptional, but they were willing to give him up because the Twins were willing to give up a hitter who was having a monster year. And it just reminds me of, what if the Royals had traded Jorge Soler when Jorge Soler was a monster hitter, and not when Jorge Soler was, semi-broken in the last year of his contract. If you're transactional, if you trade guys at their greatest value, you can find Joe Ryans on the trade market for every now and then. And you can find a guy who turns into an above average major league starter. I mean, it's, the Royals do that so rarely. And it's frustrating because when they do it well, because we just, one of the other other positive developments we've seen this season I want to talk about was Edward Olivares. Edward Olivares, I'm pleased because I thought he could hit, but my concern was if he didn't get off to a hot start, he might get buried quickly. He looked good on opening day. He homered today. I'm hoping he's going to get the bulk of the playing time in left field now.
I am as well, not only because I bought him in my fantasy auction, but because along with Kyle Isbel, along with Nicky Lopez, I do not have Brad Keller, so I expect it to the first time in I think 6 years. So I expect good things from Brad Keller. And on the Brad Keller front, and before we get a little bit more into Olivares, you mentioned Joe Ryan. Today there was a guy who pitched today. I'm going to read some things. You tell me when you know who he is, okay?
Okay.
He did not pitch for the Royals, as he pitches for another team.
Okay.
Drafted in the 30th round in 2015. Granted free agency in 2019. Signed as a free agent in 2019 with a different team. Traded in 2020 for someone that no one listening to this podcast has ever heard of. Then traded again with someone that most people in this podcast, I'm sure, have probably never heard of, for guys that nobody you've ever really heard of.
Okay. So he keeps getting traded and traded. Okay.
And released, done in 2019. Team control. They said, we're out. We're done. Go do whatever you want to do. Jeffrey Springs today for the Tampa Bay Rays. 6 innings, 12 Ks. The guy was given up on. He was drafted in the 30th round by the Texas Rangers and was given up on. They walked away. And, then they signed him, and then they traded him to the Red Sox for Sam Travis, traded by the Red Sox with Chris Mazza to the Rays for Ronaldo Hernandez and Nick Sogard, right? And so you're talking about a guy who now looks like he is Cliff Lee at the height of his powers.
Basically.
Right? I mean,
he had a 5.42 career ERA in 85 innings before he got to Tampa Bay. He was 28 years old and then was excellent in relief in 2021, moved to the rotation last year and was better.
Yeah.
He may be like the Tampa has so many success stories with pitchers, but the Jeffrey Springs story is like everything this is why I'm so happy that the Royals rated the Rays for their manager and bench coach. Like I would take every person in that organization if I could, because with no money they're finding Jeffrey Springs, and meanwhile the Royals have higher payrolls and are spending money on guys like Jordan Lyles just to fill out the rotation. So
and they found the ball of clay that was Jeffrey Springs, but they made Jeffrey Springs. Right. And that's what has to happen. And that's where I'm optimistic. And let's give him a little bit more time. But that's what has to happen with Brad Keller. And then they trade him. And then they go get young talent that they can have for 5 or 6 or 7 years. And then they find cast-offs from other teams because the spin rate or the data somewhere says there's something there. And then their guys go unlock it. They add a pitch. Again, joking around with friends today, it was like, he came in, he had one decent pitch that he didn't throw that much. I'm sure if we went back and looked, he throws some pitch way more now than he ever did. They took away some turd pitch. He threw way too much, and then they gave him a new pitch. I guarantee you. They do it all the time down there, and it's just not so hard.
Right. And they tell guys to throw down the middle. Who is it? Oh gosh. He's in AAA now. He's like as a pitcher. He had a really nice Twitter thread. He's basically barely pitched for the last 5 years because he's been injured. Maybe somebody in the comment section can remind me who this is. But signed with Tampa Bay, and he had a nice long Twitter thread about what Tampa has taught him since he got there. And it's basically Kyle Snyder, the pitching coach, was like, "There's 3 things we do here. We make your pitches as nasty as possible. We tell you to throw it down the middle, and then we win." And he was no, it's not Richard Lovelady, you in the peanut gallery. We'll get to him. Don't worry. But it's just a brilliant summation of what the Rays do. They make your pitches as nasty as possible. They make you throw the best ones the most, which is it's common sense stuff. This is stuff you could tell a 5th grader, and they'd get it. What's your best pitch? Throw it more. Let's make your pitches better, and then throw it down the middle so we can get, your stuff is good enough that you're not going to get, lit up if you throw strikes right down the middle, especially on the first pitch of the at-bat. Actually, there was a very good article on Yahoo Sports earlier today about this Rays method of how the Rays method of throwing strikes right down the middle of the plate and having the catcher set up in the middle is catching on throughout baseball. And to their credit, the Royals were actually heavily featured in this article about how that is a big part of their philosophy now, and to the point where the Royals are debating having bonuses for pitchers who throw pitches down the middle of the plate that get hit for home runs. It's sort of a kangaroo court in reverse,
right.
Not a real financial incentive. But the point is that they're trying to encourage their pitchers to throw strikes down the middle, because throwing when you throw a pitch. A strike on 0-0. Like the batters swing less on the first pitch of an at-bat than any other pitch in that at-bat. So they're more likely taking. So you could steal a free strike. Getting, a free strike on 0-0 changes the complexion of the bat completely. What a hitter does when they're down 0-1 in a plate appearances versus 1-0 is absolutely massive. And even if they swing, and even if they put the ball in play, their batting average is like is over 300, but guess what? So is their on-base percentage. Like your on-base percentage is exactly the same as your batting average. And you give up, I think, something like 6% of first pitch strikes are actually put in play for a base hit. So 94% of the time, it's either a foul ball or they take the pitch. And If you're throwing it down the middle, great. Then you're getting strike one. So that is something the Royals are implementing. It's good to see that they're actually incentivizing. It's not just talking a good game. They're actually incentivizing doing that. It's too early for us to see where their strike rates, their strikeout and walk rates are for this season, but they're walking the walk so far. But you talk about getting Brad Keller and turning him into a good pitcher and then trading him away. I'd rather they find the non-roster invitee, the Jeffrey Springs type that you turn into a great pitcher. And now you've got a commodity for 5 years that you either keep or you can trade for a lot more talent. That's what the Rays do. We're still waiting to see who's that first Royals Rays success story will be. But I'm hoping sometime this year, some pitcher you and I have never even mentioned on the podcast before comes up from AAA or whatever, or somebody in our bullpen right now and shocks us by pitching much better than we expect.
I want to go back to this comment here that A-Log made a bit ago. He said, if Bobby Witt Jr. can't be the franchise guy, then who? And the answer to that question is it doesn't matter. You don't have to have a franchise guy.
I was going to say, franchise guys are a little overrated. Look at the 2015 Royals. Who was the franchise guy there?
They didn't
Maybe
have
Alex Gordon. I mean, he was getting paid like one, but there was no superstar. Lorenzo Cain was basically the best player on that team. But would you call it a franchise guy?
No. And that's the point, is like that mindset of replicating. I have no doubt A-Log, it's ALOG 1 2 3 4. So I'm gonna call you A-Log. Put up your age in a second here, but I'm gonna guess you're old enough that you watched the Royals when George Brett was prominent. You're down the avenue of me and Rany's age, and you remember that team, and that's what you yearn for, is a George Brett. Get that out of your head, okay? Because in all likelihood, it's not going to. He's 21.
He's 21. He has totally no memory. He doesn't remember Mike Sweeney. Forget George Brett.
Well, thanks for playing. First of all, I'm not sure I believe it, but okay. I'm not going to ask you to submit a picture or anything, but and that's fine. The point is, that's just not the way, small market baseball is won now. It just isn't. And maybe there'll be one core anchor guy, one Joey Votto, but that hasn't been successful for the Reds.
You'd love to have that guy. You hope Bobby Witt will be that guy. The Orioles, are hoping that Adley Rutschman will be that guy. But the thing about why I'm so bullish on the Orioles going forward is because they have multiple guys who could be that, right? It could be Rutschman. It could be Gunnar Henderson, right? Grayson Rodriguez, if he gets healthy as a pitcher. Like, the point, talent is talent. And if you have a superstar, great, but you'd rather have talent everywhere. You'd rather have depth, especially if you're a small market team. You're going to use 30 or 40 or 50 guys in a season. If the 30th guy on your team is better than the 30th guy on another team, that's a competitive advantage. And all of this is a long-winded way for me to get around to what the hell were the Royals doing selling Richard Lovelady to the Braves?
Wait a minute. Can I, before we move on to that, say shame on me, because if I'd have paid attention, A-Log is on Twitch. And so there's no way he was going to be.
There's no way he's
older.
I think he might actually be 14 and pretend to be 21.
Brent is on Facebook. Brent probably remembers. Brett is on Facebook. He probably remembers George Brett's. I mean, not that Facebook goes all the way back then, but you're just more likely to be there. So that's my mistake. All right, so let's get to it. Dogs and cats sleeping.
Yeah.
Look, Richard Lovelady.
I can pop a vein or have my head physically removed from my body, and you can perform an exorcism and get it back on. I've seen this too many times to get too worked up about it. It's opening day. It's hope springs eternal. The weather's beautiful. Everyone's excited. It's like 4 hours to first pitch, and I get the press release in my email box. Royals trade left-hander, even up to the point where I read left-hander. I'm thinking, oh, maybe they found a buyer for Amir Garrett. Silly me, naive me, thinking the Royals might actually trade for talent, trade a guy who's established himself, trade high, sell high and buy low. No, after 4 years of screwing around with Richard Lovelady, having him not get along with your pitching coach, having him blow out his elbow, having him go through rehab, having him come back late last year in AAA, having him look good in spring training. The results were there. Yes, I heard his velocity was down, and maybe that's a reason why they give up on him. But velocity or not, 8 innings, 5 hits, no walks. I think 10 strikeouts, 9 or 10 strikeouts in spring training from a guy who, before he got hurt, had some of the best numbers in your minor league system. To decide at that moment, hours before spring training is over, that we're going to get rid of him. We're not trading him for talent. We're trading him for cash considerations. We are selling him to another team. Why? I say why for multiple reasons. One, okay, you needed a 40-man roster spot, so they had to trade him. No, they didn't have to trade him. That's what Colin Snyder is for. I've been saying this for months. Why is Colin Snyder on the 40-man roster? Why was Colin Snyder added to the 40-man roster last year? The Royals saw something in him in AAA in 2021. I don't know what it is, because he had a 4.48 ERA in AAA. He had 64 strikeouts and 26 walks in 66 innings as a minor league reliever, but they really liked what they saw from him. They added him to the 40-man roster. Okay, well, maybe they saw something we didn't. Well, last year he had a 6.55 ERA with the Royals, and he went back to AAA. He had 15 walks and 13 strikeouts in Omaha last year. Do you know how far you are from a major league pitcher when you have more walks than strikeouts in Omaha? Colin Snyder was your get out of jail free card. You have a roster spot on this guy. No, you know what? You could probably designate him for assignment. There's a chance you'd be able to keep him, because I'm not sure anybody else would claim him. But if not, oh well. Another fungible, indistinguishable right-handed reliever. But no, you had to give up on Richard Lovelady. Now, well, that's one why. That's one why. The other why. Okay, I said, people said, well, his velocity was down in spring training. He was throwing in the upper 80s. Okay, that's fine. On the one hand, you have the Royals over here saying Richard Lovelady doesn't show the stuff to be a major league pitcher. On the other hand, you have the dermatologist in Chicago who's been yelling at the team not keeping Richard Lovelady around. Okay, that's fine. Except no, it's over on one side you have the Kansas City Royals saying this guy's not worthy of a 40-man roster spot. On the other side, you have the Atlanta Braves, team that won the World Series 18 months ago. Team with one of the deepest rosters in the sport. Of the 26 guys on their 26-man roster, do you know how many of them are signed for the next 10 years? 28 of them. That's right. Every single player on the Atlanta Braves roster is signed for the next 10 years. Not exactly. Okay, fine. But close enough. Like, they have everybody on that roster signed forever. It's incredible what Alex Anthopoulos has done in terms of getting cost control, getting guys signed to long-term deals over there. And yet the Atlanta Braves looked at this left-handed reliever the Royals had, who apparently is not throwing very hard in spring training, and said, we can find a 40-man roster spot for that guy. With all of our talent, all of our depth, all of our winning, we can find a spot for Richard Lovelady. The Royals, losers of 97 games last year, could not. So it's not an argument between me and the Royals. It's an argument between the Braves and the Royals. The last time the Royals and the Braves had an argument like this, I'm going to go back, because I love history, my friend. I'm going to go back 17 years. Is that okay? Can I go back 17 years?
Okay.
To 2006. I think actually the trade was made probably after late 2005. Yes, December 19th, 2005. The Royals had a guy on their 40-man roster, a hitter. Okay? And this hitter briefly played for the Royals in 2005. Remember, the 2005 Royals were terrible. And he had a 727 OPS, a 94 OPS plus. Not bad. He's a left fielder. Not bad. Not great. But hit 369 in AAA with 1,037 OPS. The Royals had gotten him from Tampa Bay. But this is not the smart Tampa Bay Rays. This is the bad, dumb Tampa Bay Rays. In 2004, they had him. They let him go. The Royals picked him up. He had hit 332 in AAA in 2000. 332 in 2004. He had 354 in 2003. So 3 years in a row, he did over 330 in the minors. But after the 2005 season, the Royals said, we don't really think this guy can play. He's not worth a 40-man roster spot. They traded him to the Atlanta Braves for a minor league pitcher. And if the guys in the comment section want to guess, they could try 20 times. None of them are going to figure out who it was. The guy never got out of A-ball. A guy named Ricardo Rodriguez, just for the record. This guy, his name is Matt Diaz. I don't know if you remember Matt Diaz, but Matt Diaz, immediately after being traded from the Royals, the worst team in baseball in 2005, to the Atlanta Braves, hit 327 as a rookie in 2006 and 323 plate appearances. He hit 338 the following year. He had an off year in 2008, hit 244, then bounced back to hitting 313. For that 4-year stretch, Matt Diaz hit 316 with a 363 OBP, 466 slug. He was probably the best fourth outfielder in the game. Now, did the Atlanta Braves, was this guy the best player on the team? No. Was he the difference between them winning a world championship and them losing 100 games? No. Was he a valuable commodity? Absolutely. Did they have to give up anything to get him? No. Did the Royals let go of a player who would have been one of the best players on their team in 2006? For no reason? Yeah, they did. And it's not that Matt Diaz was guaranteed to succeed. It's that there was no upside in letting him go. And that's the same thing with Richard Lovelady. He may end up not being a major league pitcher at all. He pitched in AAA today. The Braves sent him out AAA. He pitched today in a 13-12 game and was probably the only pitcher on either team that pitched well. He got 4 outs, struck out a batter. No walks, no hits. But he may be a AAA guy in the end. He may not be a major leaguer. But you gave him up for cash. And it's silly decisions like this. Depth matters. Every roster spot matters. The Kansas City Chiefs know that. The Kansas City Chiefs, with the best player in football, still care about every one of their 53 roster spots. Because you never know when you need a special teams guy to make a play. You never know when you need Marcus Kemp to come in the AFC Championship game because you've got 13 injured wide receivers and make a key catch. Every roster spot matters. The Royals just gave one up for no reason. It's frustrating, Soren. I'm sorry. It's just frustrating.
It is. And Brett makes a good point. He says, I wish I could care about something as deeply as Rany cares about a left-handed reliever with a 5.62 ERA. But that's the point, Brett, is the upside and the fact that they've never really just turned it over to him while they continue to turn it over to Colin Snyder. Right? That's the point. The point isn't that Richard Lovelady is going to go on to be, turn into Springs and be stretched out and become a starter and throw BBs and strike everybody out the way he did today for the Rays, or even that he'll be Aroldis Chapman and a closer. The point is there's certainly upside there. And pretty much when you are going to give a guy away and just take cash back, if that team's got a better record than you, don't you have to just stop and go, wait a minute, why are we doing this? Right? Like it's the old adage of the Rays want to make a trade and you think they're going to ask for your best prospect and then they don't. Well, don't trade whoever they're asking for because they seem to always be right. Well, there's a little bit of this. Like if a championship caliber club has a spot for Richard Lovelady on the 40, why don't you? That's what we're getting at. That's the point. Exactly. It's not the passion that Richard Lovelady can't fail. No, he's been a guy, and it's been well known. He's been sideways with the organization for some of their ways of handling their pitching that they now themselves have admitted were wrong.
Exactly.
So, yeah, frustrating.
Let's put it this way: like you're right. Will he be a Aroldis Chapman? No. Will he be a number 2 starter? No. Could he end up being almost as valuable as Jake Junis was with the Giants last year? Maybe. I hope we're not doing a Richard Lovelady minute every week this season like we did last year with Jake Junis. But the point is, every roster spot matters, and he would have helped this team, I think. So
yeah,
it's not going to be the difference between the Royals becoming a championship organization and not. But it's just as a symptom, it's frustrating.
By the way, speaking of championship organizations, if you're looking to join a championship organization, our fine sponsor, Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions. Project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, crew members. Starting pay, folks, up to $30 per hour based on experience with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. You can check them out at GannAsphalt.com. To find out more information, that's GannAsphalt.com. Making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lots. Rany, let me leave you with this. They're 0-3. What percentage chance do you give that they reach 500 again at any point this season? I guess would reach it for the first time. I don't know if you're 0-0 counts.
No, it doesn't. Will they ever be a 500 team? I mean, look, you and I said 77 and 85, which means they are a close to 500, like a 470 winning percentage team. If they truly are a close to 500 team, the odds, mathematically speaking, you could run a simulation. I would say it's probably at least 1 in 3, but Having seen them go 0-3, maybe you got to downgrade what you think they're capable of this year. If I had to put odds on it, I'd say no more than 1-4, maybe 1-5. Look, I've seen this play way too many times. The Royals get off to a terrible start in April. At this point, I think the odds here, let's put it this way: the odds that they ever see 500 are probably not much higher than the odds that they, having already started 0-3, start the year 0-6 and get that first 6-game losing streak of the season, which they always have before Memorial Day. That they up the ante this year by having it in the first 6 games of the season. So let's hope. The Blue Jays are a very good team. I know at least one pundit who's picked them to win the World Series. So let's hope 0-3 doesn't turn into 0-6, because there's going to be a stadium construction measure on the ballot in later this year. And I really don't think that's the kind of impression the Royals want to start with their fan base months before asking them for a couple bill.
No, I would agree. Let's hope we're talking next week about how they're already above 500. But it does not. We've discussed it. I think as much for the fan base, as much for their stadium vote, this team needs to get off to a good start. It already has made that very hard for them to do. So that's going to do it for us. By the way, remember, if you're catching us via the podcast, we stream live Sunday nights, 10 o'clock Central Time is always the plan. Sometimes that moves back by a day, but generally speaking, that's what it is. You can find Rany. We always tweet out about when we are at Jazayerli. You can find me at Soren Petro. For the good doctor, Rany Jazayerli, Soren Petro, saying thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman Corner.